Within the movie The Donut King, we were able to see the dynamic relationship between populations and communities. I think one huge thing we saw was the American population really greatly impacted the Cambodian refugee population from being able to kind of come in and integrate because we primarily in America speak English. There was a huge language barrier for Cambodians to be able to come in and fully integrate, get jobs, connect with one another just because there wasn't a shared common language. So I think that's a huge way the population affected the community. Vice versa, I think the Cambodian refugee community impacted the population because all of a sudden we had this huge influx of people who needed jobs, who needed shelter and support, and so there was a call to the American population to, as you saw in the movie, take in and adopt these families and provide them jobs and homes and all of that. And while I don't think it strained the American culture in any way, I do think it did change and it did have an impact because all of a sudden we had this, desire, need, and kind of duty and obligation to help these members who had been displaced and gone through too much that no one should ever have to go through. So, they impacted us because we had to come in and kind of help take care of them. But in return, looking at some of the things they did, they also gave us amazing things like donut shops and mom and pop shops that, would not have been there had they had not come in and had Ted not started these businesses. So they affected our population in so many different ways as well. I think a modern day example is looking at minority groups and looking at kind of the American population as a whole and the values. I'm going to reference the government, but since we are a democracy, we vote in the policies we want to see. So when I say government, I'm talking about the legislation passed, but we as an American population value things and have kind of, voted them into place. So with that being said, minorities have a huge impact on government. For years and years, I think, have been kind of brushed aside, but now more than ever, they've advocated for themselves. They've shared their stories, and, they are able to help us as a culture grow, be all inclusive, and honestly just be accepting and tolerating. I think an example is the BLM stuff going on nowadays and just allowing us to really be able to embrace all cultures and to have a respect for every human being no matter what they look like. And that would not have been done had these minority groups not been in place. And I think vice versa, because these minority groups have come in and advocated for themselves, we as a general kind of population have really valued minorities and we value immigration and we value all of this because we're built off of immigration and we value, allowing everybody to have an equal playing field to be successful and to have a happy, successful life. And so with that, we vote policies in to make these applicable. And we vote in things like, I think a big example is the affirmative action law. This is a law that's within the government that allows minorities to be more likely to get into colleges, to get more access to federal money for scholarships and stuff like that. And because of that, now more than ever, we're able to have minority populations coming in and getting accepted into colleges and getting educations without really needing kind of the privilege that a lot of people needed before to get into schools and to get into things like that. So, I think kind of the dynamic relationship, minorities helped build us as a culture and being accepting and tolerating, loving and respecting all. But then in turn, we now value that so much. So we create these laws and policies in place to protect that and to create opportunities so everybody can thrive no matter what. And I think, this ultimately gets back into occupational therapy. We as OTs, we want to provide to everybody and anyone and everyone. And I think for us, we view people holistically and we're able to come in and treat people holistically. What I mean by that is, when communities are displaced, like the Cambodian refugee, or when there's a community that has this struggle or this issue, we as OTs can come in and help them problem solve, but do it in a way that's meaningful for them. If we came in, American OTs came into these Cambodian refugees and said, just do this, and didn't really take into account their cultures, what they had been through, their stories, they would not have been able to be as successful in helping them come in and find their way in life in America. And so, it's a small example, but I think this movie really shows how occupational therapy, how important it is to look at somebody holistically when treating them and trying to help integrate them into a new society, especially after they've gone through something traumatic.